The hallway was dim, the only light coming from the bathroom door left ajar. Steam spilled out into the air like a secret escaping. I stood there in my robe, frozen, while he looked at me from just a few steps away. Neither of us said a word. His shirt was damp, hair wet from the shower he didn't mean to walk into. Or maybe he did. His breath hitched. My heartbeat was unbearable, loud, uneven, wrong. I should have walked away. I should have said something, laughed it off, called it awkward. But instead, we just stood there, caught in this unbearable pause. I took half a step closer. He didn't move. One more inch and everything I knew about myself would collapse. My fingers curled in, nails digging into my palm. His lips parted, not a word, just breath. I tilted my head, just slightly. And then, before I begin the story and tell you how everything really happened, answer this question: would you be able to forgive a loved one's betrayal? Thanksgiving in our house was always chaotic in the most familiar way. Distant cousins crowding the hallway, the scent of cinnamon rolls and sage stuffing in the air, the Macy's parade blasting from the living room TV like some kind of ceremonial soundtrack. I was never the center of attention, and that suited me fine. I played hostess, refilled drinks, timed the turkey, and smiled for photos I never asked to be in. When he arrived, my husband's nephew, I didn't even recognize him at first. The last time I saw him he was barely out of high school, a lanky, awkward teenager who spilled soda on the couch and called me ma'am like it was a curse. But the young man who stood in my foyer now had broad shoulders, a quiet confidence, and a rolling suitcase trailing behind him. His flight had been delayed twice, and he still managed a calm, apologetic smile as I opened the door. The guest room had been taken. A mix-up with bookings. Too many relatives and not enough beds. My husband offered a shrug and handed him a spare blanket. Crash on the couch tonight, we'll figure it out in the morning. He didn't complain. Dinner was a loud, chaotic mess. My brother-in-law overcooked the carrots. The cranberry sauce came from a can and still had the ridges. Nobody cared. The table buzzed with the sounds of forks, football commentary, and casual passive aggression layered with gravy and laughter. I kept catching his eyes across the table, not intentionally, just accidentally. He didn't talk much, but when he did, he made everyone listen. After pie, people drifted. Some napped, others played cards or scrolled on their phones in corners. I escaped to the kitchen, pretending to clean. The faucet ran too long. The air felt too warm. He stepped in behind me to toss a paper plate. We both reached for the trash can at the same time. I smiled politely. He nodded. That was all. By midnight, most of the house was asleep. My husband had taken 2 Benadryls for digestive reasons and was snoring before I even turned off the lamp. I couldn't sleep. Too much noise in my head. I wrapped myself in a robe and went downstairs for tea. I found him in the kitchen, sipping water from a blue Solo cup. His eyes widened slightly when he saw me. "You can't sleep either?" I asked, my voice softer than I intended. He shook his head, half a grin forming. Not used to East Coast humidity. We stood there like that, the hum of the fridge the only sound. I asked him about Denver. He asked me about the neighborhood. The conversation was light, forgettable. And yet I remembered everything. The way he leaned against the counter. How his hand gripped the cup. The slight rasp in his voice when he laughed. When I turned to leave, he said, "Good night." I looked over my shoulder and answered, "Sleep well." It meant nothing. And yet everything. The next morning began with the usual bustle. Kids arguing over waffles, my husband shouting at the coffee machine. I barely noticed the towel on the banister or the sound of the running shower upstairs. I stepped into the master bath, robe tied loosely, toothbrush already in hand. The door wasn't locked. Why would it be? It never was. I opened it, stepped inside, and froze. He was there. Standing under the water. The glass door of the shower partly open. He turned at the sound, eyes widening in shock. I saw nothing. I turned instantly. But I saw everything. And something unspoken passed between us in that second. He mumbled something, an apology or a curse, I couldn't tell. I backed out, closed the door too hard, and stood in the hallway with my pulse racing, a hot flush crawling up my neck. I didn't tell my husband. At breakfast, I burned the toast. Spilled the orange juice. Laughed too loudly at jokes that weren't funny. No one noticed. He didn't come down until later. His hair damp, shirt creased, eyes quiet. He didn't say a word about it either. That evening, while folding towels in the laundry room, I found a post-it note. Yellow, slightly curled at the edge, stuck to the detergent box. Sorry. I didn't mean to. No signature. I stared at it for a long time, then folded it neatly and slid it into the pocket of my robe. The rest of the day passed in fragments. Someone's kid broke an ornament. My husband found a football game to yell at. I kept looking for silence and not finding it. That night, I dreamt of water. Steam. Silence. Someone standing too close. I woke up with my robe still on, the post-it still in the pocket, and the note pressed into the curve of my hip like a hidden bruise. The morning after the shower incident started like any other, but everything felt different. My robe still hung on the door where I'd left it. The note, his note, remained tucked safely in the pocket, pressed like a secret against my side as I moved around the kitchen. Coffee brewed. Toast popped up. People shuffled in wearing flannel pajamas and bed hair, complaining about the cold. And I smiled through all of it. But I wasn't really there. Every sound was muffled, every movement slowed, except when I caught a glimpse of him entering the room. His presence sent a jolt through my spine. He was careful not to look at me, and I returned the favor. At least, I tried to. Mid-morning, the snowstorm began. What was supposed to be a light flurry turned into thick, blinding sheets of snow. The kind that silences everything, even thought. Local alerts buzzed on the TV, roads closed, travel discouraged, power outages reported in nearby counties. My husband mumbled something about checking the backup generator. Everyone hunkered down. No one was going anywhere. The fireplace became the heart of the house. A few of the younger ones dragged board games from the basement, Clue, Uno, Monopoly, and spread them out on the living room floor. My husband laid claim to the armchair closest to the fire with a bowl of pretzels in his lap. I took the couch corner, pretending to knit. He sat across from me on the floor, legs crossed, casually flipping property cards. When he laughed, it sounded too loud. When he passed the dice, our fingers almost touched. The day passed in slow motion, though the atmosphere was buzzing. Conversations floated around me, but I only heard half of them. I kept catching snippets from him, quips about community chests, jokes about jail cards, muttered curses when he landed on boardwalk. Then came the moment with the Christmas lights. The storm had cut off our plans to decorate the porch, but we decided to do the living room anyway. Boxes came down from the attic. Tangled cords, glittery ornaments, paper snowflakes from years ago that still bore the sticky fingerprints of now-grown children. I stood on the stepladder, reaching for the top corner of the window to loop a strand of lights when the plug slipped from my hand. I got it, he said, already bending down to retrieve it. I held my breath as he rose, handing it back to me with a quiet look I couldn't read. The power blinked. The house fell into momentary darkness, just 2 seconds, but it was enough. I stepped down, heartbeat skidding. The silence was thick. In the dimness, I turned toward him, my hand still holding the plug, our faces close, too close. Then, we kissed. The lights came back on immediately. I blinked at the brightness. Across the room, my husband stood near the fuse box, fiddling with the switch and cursing under his breath. No one else noticed. Or maybe they did. My ears roared with silence. Later that night, I went to the kitchen to wipe counters that didn't need wiping. He appeared behind me again, not a word spoken. I handed him a towel. He dried a cup. We didn't look at each other. We didn't speak. I stayed up long after everyone else. I told my husband I had a headache. He barely looked up from the football highlights. The snow had stopped by morning, but the air outside was brutally cold. I stepped out to grab firewood and caught a glimpse of him standing by the backyard fence, talking to one of the cousins. He was laughing, animated. His shoulders relaxed, hands moving. I stood at the kitchen window, a log in each hand, and stared like a stranger peering into someone else's life. By noon, we decided to take a walk through the neighborhood. My husband was too busy fixing the snowblower belt to join, so I grabbed my coat and went alone, at least, that was the plan. Halfway down the block, I heard footsteps behind me. Fast, catching up. I didn't plan that, he said, his breath puffing in clouds. I know. It just happened. I know. Neither of us said the one thing we were both thinking, what now? We turned the corner together. Walked past houses with wreaths on their doors, inflatable Santas slowly deflating in front yards, tire tracks pressed into the frozen slush. It felt like another world. One where nothing had happened. One where everything had. Back at the house, I pretended to be tired. Curled up with a blanket and a book I didn't open. My husband asked if I was okay. I said yes. He nodded and turned back to the TV. Evening came quickly. The family gathered again, this time for board games and leftover pie. Laughter echoed through the walls, children ran up and down the stairs, someone spilled cider on the carpet. My husband didn't move from the recliner, and I didn't move from the silence in my chest. And then the lights flickered. Not off. Not like before. Just a subtle pulse, a heartbeat. Everyone paused. That's weird, someone muttered. My husband stood up, muttering something about checking the panel again. The moment passed. But not for me. Later, after midnight, I padded into the hallway in slippers. The thermostat had dropped again. I passed the guest room door, barely open. A sliver of light from the lamp illuminated the edge of the bed. He wasn't asleep. Neither was I. But I kept walking. I didn't turn back. Until I saw it. At the end of the hallway, propped against the stair rail, was a bag. His bag. Packed. The zipper closed, tight and deliberate. I stared at it for a long moment before heading back to bed. In the morning, he was gone. No goodbye. No note. No explanation. Just silence. And the tangled mess he left behind, invisible but everywhere. The suitcase by the stairs haunted me through breakfast. It was gone before anyone else noticed. I didn't ask. I didn't have to. He left, and everything in the house snapped back into routine as if it hadn't bent at all. The tension vanished. My husband was back to grumbling about the thermostat and burned coffee. The nephews, cousins, and stray relatives left gradually over the next few days, and the house felt oddly balanced again, like nothing had been out of place. But I knew better. Still, I played my role. I folded laundry with cheerful hums. Took down the decorations. Reorganized the spice cabinet just to keep my hands busy. Life went back to the quiet version of normal that had always made me feel invisible. Until the invitation came. My husband's sister had planned a family brunch in town. Just a short drive to a small cafe known for its peppermint lattes and cinnamon pancakes. He didn't want to go. "I've got a call with the guys," he said, meaning his poker buddies from college who hadn't changed their schedule since 1996. "I'll go," I said casually, grabbing my scarf. "Keep everyone from thinking we're ignoring them." The cafe was loud and warm, strung with holiday lights and brimming with overcooked bacon smell and laughter. I slid into the booth and greeted the others. I smiled, answered questions, complimented someone's earrings, passed the syrup. And then he walked in. I hadn't expected it. No warning, no clue. Just the sound of the bell above the door and then him, his coat still dusted with snow, cheeks flushed from the cold, eyes scanning the room. I stiffened. My fingers curled under the table. He saw me. He looked away. Pretended not to. Slipped into a booth across the cafe with someone else, his cousin, maybe. I don't even remember who. I couldn't eat. The conversation at my table moved around me like traffic. His laughter drifted across the room once or twice. That quiet, low chuckle I remembered. He never once looked back in my direction. When I finally got up, I told everyone I was headed to the restroom, but I didn't go there. I stepped outside instead, the air biting cold against my neck. I just needed to breathe. 10 seconds later, the door opened behind me. "You shouldn't have left," I said, not turning around. "You didn't stop me," he answered. We stood on the sidewalk in front of a bakery display filled with gingerbread men and mini pies. Snow dusted the edges of my boots. People passed behind us, bundled in scarves, clutching shopping bags, caught in the lull of post-holiday sales. "I thought it was over," I said. "It's not," he replied. I didn't argue. We walked around the block once. Said nothing useful. Just footsteps and tight silence. When we turned the corner and found ourselves in front of a closed antique store, we stopped. "We shouldn't talk like this," I said. He looked straight ahead. "Then don't say anything." And we didn't. We kissed. It was short. Almost accidental. Like a pause we both fell into. Then we both pulled away like it never happened. I returned to the cafe. My coat stayed zipped the entire time. I said I had a migraine and left early. My husband didn't even ask how brunch went. That night, I couldn't sleep. I paced the hallway. Opened the fridge just to stare. Checked my phone for no reason. And then I did something I hadn't done in years. I went out for a drive. I didn't text him. Didn't call. Just drove. Out of habit, out of instinct, I ended up near the lake. The one we always visited in early spring. The one with the overlook above the water and the benches carved with names of couples long gone. It was freezing, but I got out of the car anyway and walked down the trail. The trees looked skeletal in the moonlight, the path crunchy with ice. I reached the bench, sat, breathed. For once, I felt like no one could see me, and I wasn't sure if that comforted or terrified me. And then headlights. A single pair cutting through the trees behind me. I turned. He stepped out of his car without saying a word. I didn't ask how he knew I was here. We didn't say anything. We just sat on the bench, not touching, not speaking. The cold forced us closer. We watched the lake in silence. It looked like a frozen question neither of us knew how to answer. Eventually, he stood. "I have to go back," he said. Denver? I asked. He nodded. When? Tomorrow morning. I nodded. We both stared out at the lake again. I wish we had more time, I said without thinking. We had just enough to ruin everything. I laughed once. It was dry, bitter. As he walked away, I wanted to call him back. Say something. Anything. But I didn't. I let him go again. When I got home, the lights were out. My husband was asleep. The house looked the same. But something had shifted. In the morning, I found my husband by the sink. He was pouring orange juice into a travel mug. You going somewhere? I asked. He shrugged. Just errands. I nodded, pretending not to care. He picked up his keys, then paused. You forgot something at Target last week, he said. What? The milk, he answered. It wasn't in the bags. I stared at him. I guess I did, I said. He looked at me for a second too long. Then walked out the door. And I stood there, suddenly realizing he never asked me to go to Target. That was my idea. And he remembered. I stood in the kitchen long after he left, staring at the front door as if it had something more to say. The words sat on my tongue, unspoken. He remembered the milk. That detail stuck with me like a thorn, small but impossible to ignore. Something shifted in that moment. A weight pressed behind his voice. Not suspicion. Not yet. But something close. The next day, my husband came home with a surprise. Said he found a deal online. Weekend in Vermont. Cozy cabin. 2 nights. Just the 3 of us. I blinked. 3 of us? Yeah. I invited him. Thought it'd be good. Break the tension. He looked right at me. I couldn't tell if it was a test. I nodded. Sounds nice. The drive to Vermont took 4 hours. The silence in the car was cut by bursts of static from the old FM radio and my husband's commentary about potholes and how people in Massachusetts forget how to drive in winter. I stared out the window, watching pine trees blur past. He sat in the back seat, earbuds in, staring at nothing. When we arrived at the cabin, everything felt too quiet. It was the kind of place you'd see in a catalog, firewood stacked neatly under the porch, a wreath on the door, mountains rising in the distance like a backdrop someone had painted too perfectly. But there were only 2 rooms. My husband sighed and rubbed his back. You 2 take the beds. That pull-out couch'll kill me. He was already half laughing as he opened the beer cooler and turned on the fireplace. I didn't argue. I didn't blink. We brought our bags upstairs without a word. The room was small, barely enough space between the 2 twin beds. The walls were lined with old framed photos of snowshoes and rustic barns. There was one window, and it looked out onto the driveway. The door didn't lock. We unpacked in silence. Our hands moved around each other like magnets afraid of touch. Downstairs, the fireplace crackled. My husband threw on an old sweater and made cider in a pot on the stove. We played board games, just like back at home. Settlers of Catan this time. He joked. I laughed too loud again. He poured too much whiskey into everyone's cups. I drank mine too fast. By 9, the room was warm and golden, the lights low. My husband dozed in the recliner by the fire, one boot still on, snoring softly with a throw blanket over his lap. I'm calling it, I said, pretending to yawn. Exhausted. He waved a hand and didn't even open his eyes. Upstairs, the room felt different. Smaller. Warmer. The beds were made, pillows puffed. My bag sat on the edge of the mattress like it had been waiting for me. He came up a few minutes later, his eyes flicking to mine just once before sitting down and unlacing his boots. I sat on the edge of the bed, hands in my lap, unsure what to do with them. The window was open slightly, letting in cold air that raised goosebumps on my skin. He stood. Crossed the small space between us. I didn't move. We spent night together. The next morning, I woke first. The fire had gone out downstairs. The house was quiet. The sun was low, spilling soft orange light through the curtains. I dressed quickly, not bothering to check if he was awake. I didn't speak as I slipped downstairs, heart pounding with the sound of my own thoughts. I made coffee. Burned toast again. My husband emerged 20 minutes later, rubbing his eyes. "Sleep okay?" he asked. "Like a rock," I said. He nodded. Poured himself a mug. Nothing else. No questions. No signs. Just routine. We spent the day exploring. A short trail walk behind the cabin, snow crunching under boots, breath fogging in the air. We took photos by a frozen stream. He offered to take one of just the two of us. My husband stood beside me, smiling. His arm brushed mine. The camera clicked. That night, after dinner, I reached for my earring. Noticed it was missing. I searched everywhere. Bathroom counter. Bedside table. My bag. My coat pocket. Nothing. I gave up. Figured it fell somewhere outside. The ride back home was quiet. Everyone tired. I rested my head against the window, pretending to sleep. My husband drove, tapping the steering wheel to an old Eagles song. He didn't say much. No one did. When we pulled into the driveway, I grabbed the bags from the trunk. He unlocked the door, arms full of leftover snacks and grocery bags. As I stepped inside, something caught my eye. A small box. Sitting alone on the kitchen counter. It wasn't there before. I moved toward it, slowly. No wrapping paper. Just a plain white jewelry box. Inside, my earring. And a note. Not handwritten. Printed. "You left this by the fire, H." I froze. My husband walked in behind me. "What's that?" I turned. My heart punched against my ribs. "Just my earring," I said. "I thought I lost it." He took a long sip from his thermos. "You never told me you lost anything." I didn't speak. He didn't press. But he walked past me slowly, his steps deliberate. And just before he turned into the hallway, he said something I wasn't ready to hear. "Someone's always watching. Even when no one's looking." Then he disappeared around the corner. And I stood there, holding the box, unsure who the H really was. I stood in the kitchen holding that little box as the silence around me thickened. My breath slowed. My fingertips went cold. The house was quiet again, unnaturally so, like it was waiting for me to say something, confess something, admit something I hadn't even finished processing myself. My husband had walked off casually, no questions, no confrontation, just that strange sentence left hanging in the air. Someone's always watching. The rest of the day passed in fragments. I overcleaned the kitchen, reorganized drawers that didn't need it. When he reappeared, it was as if nothing had happened. He asked me about dinner. I said pasta. He agreed like always. Routine coated everything, but the surface was thinner now. Brittle. That evening, I found myself sitting alone in the living room, lights dimmed, flicking through a photo album that had been collecting dust in the hallway cabinet. I wasn't looking for anything in particular. I just needed something still. Something quiet. Page after page of family vacations, birthdays, Christmas mornings, 4th of July barbecues. So many faces frozen in time. My smile stayed the same in every one, but I didn't recognize the woman in them anymore. My husband entered and sat across the room with a newspaper folded under his arm. He didn't speak. Just watched. For a while. I meant what I said, he murmured. I closed the album and looked at him. He didn't elaborate. Just stood and went upstairs. That night I couldn't sleep. At 2 in the morning, I got out of bed and walked quietly to the kitchen. I wasn't hungry. I wasn't even thirsty. I just needed to stand somewhere that didn't feel like it was about to collapse. On the counter sat the bracelet. The one he'd left behind months ago. The one I'd once found in my coat pocket. I had tucked it away in my jewelry drawer, hidden beneath scarves and old receipts. But now it was out in plain sight. I didn't put it there. I picked it up slowly, staring at the faded leather strap and the small metal tag etched with initials I knew too well. My heart pounded in a slow, dull rhythm. I turned it over once, twice. Then put it back where I found it, exactly how it lay. The next day was colder than usual. The forecast promised snow, but it never came. My husband spent most of the day in the garage, pretending to fix things. I stayed inside, cleaning out the front hall closet. The kind of mindless work I usually reserved for spring. Every coat, boot, and umbrella had to mean something or it was gone. Buried under a pair of old gardening gloves, I found a small white envelope. No stamp. No handwriting. Inside, a receipt from our Vermont trip. 1 room. 2 adults. But it wasn't from my booking. The printout showed it had been reprinted. Not emailed. Not texted. Reprinted. From our own home printer. I didn't need to guess who had found it. I placed the receipt back into the envelope, folded it, and tucked it deep into the pocket of my jeans. I didn't confront him. Not yet. Instead, I spent the rest of the day in deliberate silence. Later that night, I offered to make tea. He declined. Said he wasn't in the mood. He was watching a rerun of a game from last year, pretending to care. I set the mug down on the counter, untouched, and went upstairs alone. He didn't follow. The house didn't feel like a home anymore. It felt like a place we both inhabited because neither of us had anywhere else to go. A beautifully staged lie that no longer fooled either of us. The next morning, I walked into the kitchen and found the milk sitting on the counter. Just sitting there. Half full. Sweating from the cold. Cap off. It hadn't been there the night before. I opened the fridge, 3 more cartons lined up in the door. All unopened. My breath caught. I turned as he walked into the room. You bought more milk, I said softly. He shrugged. You forgot it at Target. I stared at him. That was weeks ago, I said. He smiled, but there was no kindness in it. I remembered. He poured himself coffee. Sat at the table. Sipped without a word. Then he asked, too casually, do you still talk to him? I didn't answer. He looked up, eyes calm but unreadable. Just a question, he said. I left the room without speaking. Drove around the neighborhood for almost an hour. Parked outside the grocery store and never went in. Just sat there, watching people push carts across icy pavement. Wondering how many of them were hiding something. Wondering if any of them had noticed the shift in their own lives the way I had. Like a picture frame tilted just enough to feel off without knowing why. When I returned home, the front door was unlocked. Inside, the living room lights were off. My husband wasn't in sight. I set down my bag and walked toward the stairs. And then I saw it. On the coffee table, next to the remote, was my wedding ring. I hadn't taken it off. Not even once. It had been on my finger that morning. Now it sat there quietly. Waiting. Cold metal against dark wood. Next to it, his bracelet. Both together. No note. No sound. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. And I had no idea who had left them there. The moment held, suspended like the hush before thunder. My wedding ring and his bracelet lying side by side. Quiet. Heavy. Too deliberate to be accidental. Too exposed to be private. The stillness of the room pressed against my chest as if the walls themselves were watching, waiting for my reaction. I didn't touch them. Instead, I turned and walked to the kitchen, turned on the faucet, and let cold water run over my trembling hands. It was the only thing I could control. I focused on the sensation, sharp, clean, real. Unlike everything else. When I finally returned to the living room, they were still there. He came in not long after. My husband. Coat zipped up, gloves in one hand, as if he'd just returned from a casual errand. His eyes scanned the room quickly, then landed on the table. He didn't look surprised. "You left those?" I asked, voice low. He shrugged. "Just thought they looked better together." I stood there, my pulse thudding. No yelling. No accusations. Just stillness and something colder than silence. "You didn't say anything. What would you have said if I did?" He walked past me, sat in the armchair, picked up the remote. Clicked through channels like we hadn't just crossed a line neither of us could uncross. Later, I went upstairs. Closed the bedroom door behind me. Sat on the edge of the bed and stared at my hands. The indentation from the ring was still there, a pale circle marking what used to be. I didn't know what he wanted from me. Or if he wanted anything at all. The next morning, he left early. No explanation. Just the sound of the garage door rising and falling again. I stood in the kitchen, making coffee I didn't want. The sunlight spilled through the window, warm and wrong. I decided to go out. I drove downtown, parked near the library, and walked for hours with no plan. The shops were still decorated for winter. Window displays with fake snow, twinkling lights, and red ribbons that looked too clean to be real. I stepped into a used bookstore. Browsed titles without reading. Bought nothing. By noon, I found myself back at the lake. The bench was still there, empty. I sat. The cold seeped through my coat. I didn't care. I thought about everything, the beginning, the shower, the first silence, the kiss, the cabin. I thought about how much of my life had unraveled quietly, like a thread pulling from the hem of a sweater until suddenly everything falls apart and you're left holding the yarn. Then I heard footsteps. I didn't turn around. I knew it was him. He sat down beside me, not too close. Neither of us said anything. After a long pause, he finally spoke. "He knows, doesn't he?" "I don't know what he knows," I answered. "But he's acting like someone who knows too much." We sat in silence again, the wind brushing past us like a warning. "I'm leaving," he said. "For good?" He nodded. "It's time." I didn't ask what that meant. I didn't ask if he was running or letting go. "What about everything I began?" He cut me off gently. "It already happened. We can't rewrite it." I looked at him then. Really looked. And I realized I didn't know what I had expected. Some grand gesture? A confession? An apology? I didn't even know what I wanted anymore. He stood first. If I stay, I'll ruin what's left. And then he walked away. No goodbye. Just footsteps fading into the wind. I stayed on the bench for a long time, watching the lake. The sun dipped lower. The shadows stretched longer. I felt hollow, like a house cleared out after a move, empty, echoing, cold. When I finally returned home, the house was still. No car in the driveway. Lights off. I stepped inside and noticed a small leather-bound notebook on the hallway table. One I didn't recognize. It wasn't mine. I opened it slowly. Inside, my husband's handwriting filled page after page. Dates. Observations. Fragments of sentences. Left at 4:15 p.m. Said she was going to Target. Came back at 6:27. Milk missing. Cabin booking email showed 2 guests, why not 3? Found bracelet in coat pocket. Not mine. Note on jewelry box H. Not my initial. Line after line. Page after page. Quiet, meticulous. No rage. No mess. Just details. And at the very end, the last page held a single sentence. I waited for her to say something. She never did. I stood frozen. Then, I noticed something else. Tucked between the last pages, folded once, was a single photo. A still frame from our trip to the cabin. Me, sitting by the fire. Smiling. Alone. The earring glinting on the rug next to the hearth. And in the corner of the frame, barely in view, was the edge of a boot. His boot. It wasn't staged. It wasn't hidden. It was just enough. I placed the photo back where I found it. Closed the journal. Left it exactly as it was. Then I walked to the kitchen. Opened the drawer where we kept the matches. And for the first time in days, I didn't feel cold. I felt seen. The matchbook stayed untouched. I stood with the drawer still open, my fingers hovering just above it, and let the quiet consume me. The journal remained where I left it, closed but not forgotten. His handwriting was now burned into my memory, cold, observational, restrained. I wasn't sure what unsettled me more, the fact that he knew everything, or the fact that he'd chosen silence instead of confrontation. By the next morning, his behavior changed completely. He no longer hovered. No passive glances. No cryptic remarks. No probing questions. Instead, he operated with mechanical efficiency. Dressed before sunrise. Ate standing up. Washed his own plate. Barely spoke. The man who used to fumble for the right words now used none at all. At first, I thought it was guilt. But then I understood it was withdrawal. He was done trying. The house felt bigger, emptier. Not just because of the silence, but because I suddenly realized how much noise we used to fill it with just to keep it alive. Jokes that weren't funny. Complaints about the thermostat. Grocery list debates. All gone now. I tried initiating normalcy. Suggested we watch something, anything. He said, I already saw it. I asked if he needed anything from the store. No. Even the way he shut doors changed. Slower. More careful. Like he didn't want to leave a trace. New Year's Eve arrived with no mention of celebration. No plans. No decorations. I still baked something, more out of muscle memory than hope. A frozen lasagna from the back of the freezer. I lit candles just to pretend it was intentional. He didn't come downstairs until almost 10. I poured him a glass of wine. He didn't drink it. Instead, he sat across from me at the dining table in the same chair he always used, elbows on the edge, hands clasped like he was waiting for something to begin. I couldn't take the weight of the silence. "I know," I said. He looked at me, finally. "I know you know." And that was it. No accusations. No breakdowns. No need for anything more. The clock ticked. 11:30. 11:40. He stood up and walked toward the stairs. I followed with my eyes but didn't move. At midnight, the sound of distant fireworks thudded somewhere beyond the windows. I didn't bother looking. I sat there alone, the lasagna cold, the wine untouched, and the room thick with something final. The days that followed blurred. He worked longer hours. Or pretended to. I stopped asking. He stopped pretending. One morning, I came downstairs to find a list on the counter. Things to fix. Leaky faucet. Garage light. Master bedroom paint touch-up. Clean out attic. No signature. No context. But his handwriting. I stood staring at it until the toast burned. That weekend, he announced he was visiting a friend 2 states away. Said it like it was nothing, like it wasn't the first time he'd gone anywhere alone in years. I asked how long he'd be gone. Couple days. He didn't pack much. Just a duffel and his coat. I watched him walk to the car. No hug. No look back. Just a turn of the ignition and a reverse down the driveway. As soon as he left, I moved. I grabbed old boxes from the closet and headed to the attic. I needed something, anything, to shift the stillness inside me. The stairs creaked. Dust rose like memory. I opened the first box and found our wedding photos. I didn't cry. The second box held Christmas ornaments. Ones we hadn't used in years. Tucked beneath the garland was a small velvet pouch. I opened it without thinking. Inside, the watch I gave him our 10th anniversary. Still ticking. Underneath the pouch was something else, a folded piece of paper with creases so sharp it looked ironed. I unfolded it. A printout of an airline confirmation. Round trip. Denver to New York. Passenger, his nephew. Dates, last month. I stared at it, not breathing. He had come back. He had been here. And I never knew. The name on the reservation matched the one on the bracelet. It wasn't just a coincidence. It wasn't just a fluke. I checked the dates again. Cross-referenced them with the journal in my head. The days when my husband had been home. The day he found the earring. The night I thought I was alone. He had been in our house. Quietly. Hidden. The bracelet hadn't been forgotten. It had been returned. Deliberately. I sat back on the attic floor, knees pulled up, heart rattling against my ribs. What had they said to each other? What had they agreed on? Or worse, what had they both decided to leave unsaid? That night, I didn't sleep. I moved through the house like a shadow. Every creak in the floorboards sounded louder. Every turn of a doorknob echoed. I found myself walking into rooms without purpose. Opening drawers. Rechecking the earring box. The bracelet. The journal. All still there. Untouched. But something else was missing. A pair of keys. I remembered keeping a backup set in the kitchen drawer, the one with rubber bands and paper clips and expired coupons. I opened it. Dug through. The keychain with the leather tag wasn't there. I turned slowly, hearing a sound behind me. Nothing. I checked again. The keys were gone. Then I noticed the back door wasn't locked. My hand shook as I reached for it, hard hammering. And just before I turned the handle, I heard it. The faintest creak on the porch. Someone had been there. Or maybe still was. My hand froze on the doorknob, breath hitched just above my chest. I stood perfectly still, straining to hear through the thick silence that pressed against the back door. Nothing followed. No more footsteps. No knock. Just that one creak that now rang louder than any confrontation ever could. Slowly, I stepped back. My heart beat so loudly I could feel it pulsing in my throat. I checked the latch. It wasn't broken. Just turned. Unlocked. I bolted it. Then I turned off every light on the first floor, room by room, until the house sat in shadows. The only light that remained was the one in the hallway, flickering slightly, like it wasn't sure whether to stay with me or give up and fade out. I didn't go to bed that night. I curled up on the couch with a blanket pulled to my chin, listening for anything. I never fell asleep, only drifted in and out of a state between awareness and exhaustion. When dawn finally arrived, I stood up without realizing it, like my body was moving before my mind had decided it was safe. But it wasn't. Nothing felt safe anymore. My husband still wasn't back. No messages. No itinerary. No ETA. He'd disappeared with only a vague mention of a friend and a bag too light to suggest he planned on staying anywhere long. I made coffee I didn't drink. Stared out the window, watching the neighborhood go on like it hadn't splintered around me. People walking dogs. Deliveries arriving. Cars reversing out of driveways. All of it too normal. By noon, I went upstairs and opened the closet in the guest room, the one we never used. I don't know what I expected to find. Maybe nothing. But I found something anyway. The drawer in the nightstand was partially open. Inside was the backup set of keys. The ones that had been missing. I stared at them for a long time. Sitting in a drawer we never touched. No dust. No mess. Just resting there like they'd always belonged. I picked them up, felt their weight. Familiar. Cold. Whoever took them had returned them. But not to their original place. To that drawer. That room. That bed. I walked back into the hall, dazed. The world shifted under my feet. Something was unraveling, and I had no idea where it had started, or if it ever really stopped. That afternoon, I drove. I didn't know where I was headed until I arrived. The overlook near the lake was nearly empty. A couple cars, probably people hiking the nearby trail. But no sign of him. I sat on the bench, pulled my coat tighter, and waited. Not for anyone in particular. Just for time to pass. Just to feel something steady. An hour went by. Then another. Eventually, I drove back. When I returned, the house was just as I'd left it, quiet, untouched, too neat. But as I stepped inside, I saw something that hadn't been there before. A box. Sitting on the entry table. No tape. No label. I opened it slowly, heart braced for anything. Inside were framed photos. Our wedding. His graduation. Christmas mornings. 4th of July barbecues. All of them, photos that had hung on our walls for years. Now packed. One by one. Neatly. Under the last frame, a small, handwritten note. Not his handwriting. It said only one thing. I wanted to remember the version of you that never lied. My knees buckled. I sat on the stairs, clutching the edge of the box, unable to move. He had come back. He had been inside. And I hadn't even known. I ran upstairs. Every room looked untouched, but I saw it now, subtle shifts. The photo frame in the bedroom turned slightly inward. The pen jar on the desk missing one. The robe that used to hang behind the bathroom door, gone. His presence had been here. Not loud. Not messy. But exact. Like he had come to reclaim something. Or leave something behind. I pulled open drawers. Checked the closets. Nothing else was gone. Except the bracelet. And the journal. I checked the hallway table twice. Then a third time. Empty. I sank into the couch as the weight of it pressed in. He had taken his story with him. Left me alone with mine. For days, I waited. Watched the driveway. Walked circles in the house. I played back every conversation, every look, every silence. I called no one. Told no one. There was nothing to explain that didn't sound like fiction. A week later, my husband returned. No warning. No knock. Just the sound of the front door closing like any other day. He stepped into the kitchen as if he'd just gone out for milk. I stared at him. His coat was wet from rain. His eyes calm. There was no suitcase. He sat at the table. Opened the newspaper. No words. "You're back," I finally said. He nodded once. "You were gone for 8 days." He didn't look up. Then finally, he said, "I needed to see how it felt." "What?" "Not being here." I didn't know what to say. He looked at me. Really looked. And then, it felt better. I opened my mouth, but nothing came. He stood. Walked past me. And then he said it. "I'll send someone for my things." I turned, panic rising. "You're leaving?" "No," he said. "I already left." And before I could speak again, he was gone. This time, for real. But when I walked into the living room again, the box was missing. And on the table? Just my wedding ring. Alone.